Good afternoon. Um, After dealing with behaviorism, we try to deal in this course number 5 with another approach, which is named psychoanalysis. First of all, I will share with you the PDF file. Psychoanalysis was created by, as we mentioned earlier, was created by Sigmund Freud, who lived till 1939, and he lived mainly in Austria, and when the Second World War appeared, he moved from Austria to London, the capital city of England. Now I will refer to the main epistemological content of this approach. The psychoanalysis is an approach to the mind, personality, and psychological disorders. Psychological treatment originally developed by Sigmund Freud at the beginning of the 20th century. The main interest of psychoanalysis is to deal with the mind and the personality and psychological disorders. And when we refer to the importance that psychoanalysis is giving to the mind, we have to mention that the mind from the psychoanalytical perspective is the unconscious part of the mind. In other words, the mind is not the conscious part of the subject, because from psychoanalysis, the subject is not mastering himself. The subject is not mastering himself, and on the contrary, the unconscious part of the mind is controlling the subject. Why? Because what is at stake here is the history of the various interactions that appeared during mainly during the childhood period, from the person when he or she born to 5 to 6 years, and this represents from psychoanalysis the main period from which we can see the personality of this or that subject. In other words, and more than that, I think it's important also to mention that psychoanalysis is concerned by the emotional life of the subject, referring to the importance of love and hate during the 6 years of the life of the subject. And here it is important to mention that psychoanalysis was also concerned by psychological disorders, and it was one of the main approach in clinical psychology, because this subfield in psychology is focusing on psychopathological problems, and the reason why psychoanalysis was a part of mainly one of the main clinical approach in clinical psychology, and because Sigmund Freud was dealing with case studies, and he was also receiving in his clinical institution various case studies and patients, and these patients were narrating their problems to Sigmund Freud, whom tried to understand and to make a diagnosis about this set of psychological disorders or this kind of psychological disorders, and the reason why, and also to Sigmund Freud tried to find a solution. It means that to find psychological treatment, which means to find psychotherapeutical technique to deal with these psychological disorders. And the reason why you can put psychology as one of the main psychological approach in clinical psychology, but it is important also that psychoanalysis is more than only clinical approach, because this approach was also applied to literature, to art, to cinema, and to educational problems, and psychoanalysis was also applied in the field of anthropology, and also in various subfields in psychology, and in other fields of in human and social sciences and in humanities. And here I think it's important to mention that psychoanalysis was also questioning as behaviorism various set of commonly accepted beliefs, and in this perspective, psychoanalysis was questioning one of the main Cartesian ideas, which refers to the importance of a human being to master himself. And psychoanalysis was mainly starting by questioning this idea by elaborating the concept of being conscious, and mainly speaking, the unconscious, or we can say the unconscious forces, or precisely the unconscious psychological forces are controlling the psyche of the subject, and are also controlling the subject behind his will and behind his mind and his intention and his speech, to which by which he or she refers to the ability to master himself and to master others and to master the external reality. On the contrary, psychoanalysis is saying that the human being is controlled not from the external environment or from others, but by himself. He is controlled by himself, or he is controlled by forces or psychological forces that are inside him, inside his psychological life, referring to the forces of the unconscious. And the content of the unconscious are various psychological interactions inside the family life. And here we refer to the interaction or the influence of both the it means various instinct, like the instinct to eat, to drink, and to sleep, etc., and various other psychological or instinctual forces, referring to the concept of the id and huwa. On the other hand, there is another set of forces referring to the importance of the superego, and here we are mentioning the weight of the moral control, like the father or the mother or the parents, when they are controlling their child, do this, do not to do this, speak like this, do not speak like this. You have to behave in that way. You do not have the permission to behave in this way, etc. All these kind of moral judgments are controlling the psyche from the internal psychological life of the subject, and from this perspective, the subject is controlled from both ways. The subject is controlled from his instinct, and is also controlled by moral forces. Both forces are the sign that the force of the conscious force collapsed, and the idea, the Cartesian idea that a human being is powerful, this idea collapsed also, because to refer to both forces, the instinctual force and the moral force, refer to the importance of the unconscious forces that are controlling the conscious force, and consequently the force of the unconscious is much more important than the force of the conscious. And here we can also refer we can refer here to we can refer here to an image which is precising Here we can refer to the image that is representing the force of the unconscious compared to the conscious and the pre-conscious mind. And here, for example, this is the part which is conscious, and this is the part from psychoanalysis. This is the part that we can control, and this part is not very very important. It's a very small parts which refer to the part that human being is controlling in his life. And there is also the pre-conscious, and the pre-conscious mind is the part which is not conscious, but which is not completely unconscious. At some point, this part is also not controlled by the subject. The subject is just controlling what is manifest, what is overt, or yes. And the pre-conscious is not controlling the subject is not controlling also this part of the pre-conscious, but it is not far from the conscious mind, which means that the pre-conscious could be sometimes conscious when it could be transformed from this place to that place. But the main part is unconscious, and the subject cannot know what is unconscious, and the subject is completely forgetting the part of the unconscious, even that this part is heavy and is controlling the will of the person. And this is at some point we can summarize at some point by this image the schema. This reflects the schema of the psyche when we refer to the different parts of the psyche as it was described by Sigmund Freud, the creator of psychoanalysis. We came back again to the text. Here we have to mention that the hallmark of psychoanalysis is the assumption that much mental activity is unconscious, as we said, and that understanding people requires interpreting the unconscious meaning underlying their overt or manifest behavior. And here the process of interpreting the unconscious meanings refer to the hidden parts of the psychological life, and the interpretation of the unconscious part of the psyche from the psychoanalysis analytical perspective. It needs verbal interaction, and by which Freud was applying the technique of free association. And here when we refer to free association, free association, it means les associations libres l'association libre which means in Arabic التداعي الحر. This kind of technique allows the psychoanalysis allows the psychoanalyst to push the patient to remember and to push the patient to transform the unconscious part of his life to becomes conscious. And in other words, the psychoanalyst try to encourage the patient to move from what the patient forget to what he or she can remember, and to remember in during the process of applying a free association allow the patient to become to understand and to understand his life, his unconscious life, and to express meanings about his unconscious life, because this unconscious life is crossed by pathological traits and pathological and psychological problems, and to remember these psychological problems and to deal with and to try to make a connection between these various parts of his psychological features and psychological events that the patient is narrating. This allows the patient to see him or herself by remembering what is the content of the unconscious life of which is characterizing the psychological life of the patient. This transfer from the unconscious life to the conscious life allows the patient to become free and to be in a better state, to be in a better psychological state. And this is the sign of understanding his psychological life, and this is the main goal that the patient may reach by transforming his pathological life that he or she forgot, and to transform this unconscious parts of his life to remember its content, and this allows the patient to understand by interpreting these various psychological difficulties, which allows the patient to becomes a free subject rather than living an unconscious life as a patient. And this is what is at stake when Freud was applying this technique, which is named the free association, to to make connection between various unconscious events which are at the source of living psychological pathology by the patient, and this was a successful technique that was applied by Freud, and which makes psychoanalysis one of the main approach in clinical psychology. And thank you for your